Today we're going to talk about what it means if an ex is uninterested in you every time you have a conversation. And if you stick around until the end of this video, I'm going to give you my 6 golden rules for making not just your ex, but anyone that you have a conversation with interested in you. But first, if you're kind of on the fence on if you want to try to go through this process and win your ex back, I actually recommend that you go to my website, www.exboyfriendrecovery.com, and take a special quiz I've designed there to tell you what kind of chance you have of getting your ex back. Taking the quiz is super easy. All you have to do is simply look below in the description link of this YouTube video and click the link you see there. All right, let's get to it. Rule number 1, incite as much curiosity as possible. One of the big benefits that I have with this audience is I have a lot of numbers. We can test different ideas out and get an idea of what's really working in the real world. And one thing that we've learned that works, especially when it comes to starting conversations or keeping conversations interesting, is that there's always embedded curiosity within the conversation. I'll give you an example. One of the text messages that we've crafted for our clients that yields response at least 90% of the time is the "I have a confession to make" text message. It goes like this. You basically pull out your phone and text your ex, "Hey, I have a confession to make, ... This text message works because it aggravates your ex's curiosity drive. By simply asking or saying, "I have a confession to make," your ex is imagining all kinds of things. What could this confession be? Did she or he cheat on me? What is going on here? I have to know. I have to find out. Now, the "I have a confession to make" text message is an extreme example of curiosity and one that I wouldn't recommend that you use unless you have a good confession to make. The way you can find that good confession is to actually hop over to my website, www.exboyfriendrecovery.com, and look at some of the articles I have there where I actually talk about this specific text message. Let's move on to rule number 2. Rule number 2, be as positive as possible. Positivity is one of the most undervalued factors for making people interested in conversations. Think of it like this. There are typically 3 reactions people can have or feel after coming from a conversation. They can feel positively about it, very satisfied with how well the conversation went. They can feel negatively about it, very upset or angry about how the conversation went, or they can feel about it, kind of neutral. Your goal anytime you have a conversation with anyone in your life is to make sure that that conversation is as positive as possible. The feeling that the person you're talking to should be leaving with should be satisfying. So find ways to become as positive as possible throughout your conversations. Now, luckily, some of the other rules that I'm about to teach you here are going to teach you how to do that or give you some strategies for doing that. But why don't you think of a few yourself? Because one of the things that you should never do is follow everything I say word for word. You need to put your own emphasis on your own ideas because that will actually be stronger in the end. So brainstorm some positive ways that you can leave your ex feeling positive after your conversations. Rule number 3. End conversations first. I've actually talked a lot about this in other videos that I've done recently, but one of the things that people tend to obsess about is who is starting the conversations first, as if that has something to do with how they're feeling about the overall relationship that you're entered in. But what I found is actually more telling of how well you're doing throughout conversations is who is ending the conversations first. So what you're really looking for here is to leave them positive or satisfied during the conversation and you ending the conversations first. Now, why does that work? Well, it utilizes a psychological principle called the Zeigarnik effect. Basically, this states that people remember interrupted or incomplete tasks better than completed ones. By aiming to end your conversations at the most satisfying part of the conversation, you leave your ex constantly wanting more. This is actually the trick that will get them to reach out first to you. A lot of women seem to be under the assumption that always be an ex should be reaching out to them first. They have nothing to do, but I actually think the opposite is true. If you want an ex to reach out to you first, especially since the dynamic is a little different than the dating scene, you have to earn the right for them to reach out to you first. And the best way to earn the right for them to reach out to you first is to end conversations at the high point. Rule number 4, figure out what's in it for him. As a rule, human beings tend to be self-interested. We care more about what happens to ourselves than what happens to other people. And this is especially true when it comes to breakups and dealing with conversations. I'll give you an example. Most of the time, the clients I work with, when they actually get into a conversation with their ex, maybe they start out by talking about neutral topics that both parties can be interested in. Slowly but surely, the conversation can tilt and turn to where the client is only talking about themselves or things that interest themselves. This can become problematic because that is how you lose your ex's interest throughout a conversation. Instead, what you should be aiming to do is try to keep the conversation mostly around topics that will interest your ex. For example, if your ex is really into literature or reading, maybe take some time, read a book that he likes, and have a conversation about it. Believe me when I say doing something like this will yield a higher impact than talking about something that only you're interested in. Rule number 5, teach your ex something new. Rule 4 dealt with situations where you're trying to figure out what your ex's interests are and keeping a conversation around those interests. Rule number 5 is the other type of conversation that you can have. You're teaching your ex something new that he didn't know. Maybe you've been doing a lot of soul searching lately. You've learned or have some ideas about what the meaning of life is and how ultimately we all span from entropy. Now, these are very, very complex topics to talk about, but they are interesting, right? So if you're teaching your ex something new that he had no idea about and can get him to engage throughout that conversation, to get him to ask questions of you, you will have successfully hooked him and become interesting throughout the conversation. Rule number 6, tap into his hero complex. One of the reasons that I prefer working with women as opposed to men is because of the gender dynamics. Men always have this need to be seen as a hero from their past lovers. And I don't know what it is, but oftentimes this is why our damsel in distress text message works so well. The premise of the damsel in distress text message goes like this. You're simply going to text your ex something that you need his help on. Generally, it's something to do with his field of study. If he's very electronically gifted or really, really good with computers, maybe you need help figuring out this program like Adobe Photoshop or Adobe After Effects. You need his help with that. So you simply text him something like, hey, could I get your help with something? If he responds yes, you will have successfully tapped into his hero complex. All men love to feel like they're loved by women. This is a successful way of doing that without losing ground or him thinking he's above you. Thank you so much for getting into the end of this video. I really appreciate it. If you haven't already, take a minute and subscribe to this channel. We're doing all sorts of cool weekly videos about breakups, relationships in general, how to make men love you, how to become ungettable. The topics just keep getting more interesting and better. And the more people we subscribe, the more incentive I have to keep pumping these amazing videos out. And if you haven't already, make sure you hop over to our website, www.exboyfriendrecovery.com, and take our Ex Recovery Chances quiz. It's a 2-minute quiz that will tell you kind of where you stand with your ex, and overall, you'll get an idea of if you should even be trying to get your ex back. Again, thank you so much for getting into the end of this video. I'll see you guys next time.